Okay, hi everyone. Disclaimer, I'm really tired. So, yeah, I like to sort of scare off like that for a little while then. I'm sorry. Um, but today we are talking about Bootstrap. Hmm. You know, I realized that when I have this open, you guys can see the things that I like most frequently look at. Oh well. None of that's too bad, I guess. Um, Okay, yeah, so we're talking about Bootstrap. Also, simply because it came up before, like Easter egg for me teaching. I like to write learning objectives in like a new and exciting way each time I teach. So today it's lemming expletives. Anyway, so check out this awesome app that we made. It is Grumbler. This is what they're looking at in the other class. I'll slack out the link to this. Which classroom are we in? Classroom 1. Yeah, so this is Grumbler written in Bootstrap, or rather coded with Bootstrap. As you can see, it's like Tumblr, but grumblier. And so it's just a way of like, you know, writing posts, so on and so forth. These posts, I'm afraid, we did not actually write ourselves. They're randomly generated from a couple of different APIs, including the pictures. So if something horribly inappropriate comes up as a picture, then just let me know, because I don't know too much about this API, but so far it seems to have been okay. Yeah, so this is a Backbone app. So here's your quick crash course in Backbone. The HTML, well, let's see. If we look at this, and look at the HTML of this page, so here is all the HTML. And you can see it doesn't really look very much like what we're actually seeing over here. I mean, 23 tigers wearing a tux. If I look for 23 tigers in here, I don't see it anywhere. So you can see something that I hope looks a little familiar in here, which is this sort of handlebars syntax. And you'll notice too that there's this weird like script ID something something with this weird type we haven't seen before of X handlebars template. So basically, what Backbone is doing is it's reading each of these scripts, and well, it's reading everything inside these script tags, and then it's using it as a template. And then for each for each grumble, it's just like handlebars. It's swapping out whatever this is, whatever's in the curly braces with the relevant piece of information from that specific grumble. And so this is all happening on the front end. There's no back end to this application. The back end is just this Grumbler API that the instructors made. And all it does is it just serves up JSON. So this doesn't have a back end. This is all front end stuff. And this is sort of the power of Backbone, is that it gives you all of this MVC functionality while still being on the front end. So the way it works is you define like, hey, I've got a grumble model, and hey, I've got a comment model. And then Backbone's like, all right, where are you getting the data from? And then it automatically queries the API for that data. And so it takes care of lots of things for you that normally would take a lot of, you know, writing .ajax a million times. Carl, I saw you first.
Just thought a group said be sure to record. Yeah.
Oh, I am recording. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, this is the first time I've screencasted anything, so I'm a little nervous. Any other questions? That was your question too? Anyone have questions not about that? No? Cool. But one trick, kind of neat thing to show you guys. Actually, let me respond to that. Oh, I'm on it. Thanks, Erica. You got my back. So let's say I wanted to actually look at the HTML that's being rendered by Backbone. I mean, the obvious thing when I think, look at HTML, I think, oh, look at the source code. But I want to look at the HTML for this specific comment. Like, I want to see where it actually says, I feel like a more appropriate picture for this post would be on the tip of an iceberg, at home in a rotting treehouse, in an old lifeboat, in the penthouse suite of a Waldorf Astoria hotel, on a busy Monday. So I want to actually see the HTML that says that, and I'm not seeing it over here. So remember, this is like what my browser starts with. This is the code that it starts with, and then Backbone takes this code that it's starting with and it renders a whole bunch of crazy stuff. To actually see the rendered HTML, I can right-click on this and inspect element, right-click, control-click, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so here's my element inspector. And then you'll probably already notice in here that this has all of the rendered HTML. You've seen that before. But let's say I wanted to like copy all of this HTML, all this rendered HTML, and show it with someone. If you click any particular element in here, and then on a Mac you hit Fn for function, and then F2, it'll show you all of the HTML inside that element. Like, see how I'm doing up here? So if I wanted to copy all of the HTML of this entire page, I would just click on this HTML tag, so the very first tag, Fn, F2, that's the brightness key on my computer, and here is all of the rendered HTML, which I think is really pretty cool. So now I can, like, if you're really anal retentive about your HTML validating, like I am, then you could copy all of this and go to the validator at w3.org, chug, and paste everything in here. The only thing I need to add in is this doctype HTML, because that doesn't get included. I've never done this before, so it's probably going to have a lot of errors. Oh, hey! Yay, good for us. We wrote good HTML. But at any rate, this is like a really handy little trick that Chrome lets you do. Yeah, Lisa. Yep, Fn. So on my computer, it's the bottom leftmost key. And then if you look really closely across the keys at the top, you should see that they have like F1, F2, F3, blah, blah, blah. So the Fn key that says, hey, don't actually toggle the brightness. Instead, do whatever F is on there. So if I hold down Fn and I hit the make brighter key, it doesn't make brighter, it does F2. So if you've used Windows before, you know how PCs have like F1, F2, blah, blah, blah. This is Mac's way of still being able to have those function keys while being able to pack in other keys as well. Questions about this? Walter, how's your oatmeal and chicken going for you? Good, I'm glad. I've never actually tried that before. I'll have to do that sometime. But if you guys feel so inclined, you can totally just like poke around in the code of this. And so here it is right here. And for some reason, we've got like 8 million branches on here, but you probably just want the solution branch. And then you can go around and you can look at all of the backbone and feel free to play around with it, mess around with it. We're going to be cloning this down in a little bit anyway. But you can see it's all separated into models, routers, and views, which should be somewhat familiar, and then collections, which is basically like a model that has a whole bunch of models inside it. So you would have a Grumble model, and then a Grumbles collection, which has a whole bunch of Grumble models inside it. Anyway, that's enough about Backbone, unless people have questions about Backbone. No? Cool. Okay, so looking back at this page right here, I feel like this page looks pretty nice. And much to my chagrin, we actually didn't write any of the CSS for this page whatsoever. I did not write a single line of CSS, and I'm still having like an existential crisis about that because I really like to write all my CSS, and I didn't this time, and it looks a lot better than pretty much anything I've ever actually done myself, which is too bad. But yeah, so this is all done using Bootstrap. So Bootstrap gives you a style sheet that includes a metric ton of classes that you can use as you want. And so this is the power of Bootstrap. Like pretty much just include Bootstrap in your application, like just do link rel style sheet href bootstrap.css, and you've pretty much got the look and feel of your website taken care of. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to open this on my computer locally. Crumbler. Yeah, this is what I want. Git checkout. Bootstrap. And then Chrome. Notice all I'm doing is opening index.html. Again, there's no backend on this at all. It's just HTML with a bunch of JavaScript thrown in. So here is this app again, and now I'm going to disable Bootstrap. I'll wait 3 years while Adam starts. There we go. I've cleverly named my Bootstrap Captain Von Bootstrap. You guys get that reference? Sound of Music? Captain Von Trap? All right, cool. All right, so here it is without all the Bootstrap in it. And so this is pretty clearly just raw HTML. Nothing exciting going on in here. And then as soon as I add it back in, Captain Von Bootstrap, it all looks hunky-dory. So Bootstrap is the visual theme upon which most of the modern web is based. So most websites nowadays try to emulate that Bootstrap look. If you go to GitHub and look at the markdown on here, I mean, this markdown borrows very, very heavily from Bootstrap. The way they render this markdown is very much based on Bootstrap. And so you see this everywhere, despite the fact that Bootstrap has only been around for, what, like 4 years? So Bootstrap originally started, it was born in 2011 as, what was it, Twitter Blueprint. That's what it was called, because it was invented by Twitter. And prior to Bootstrap, there were lots of different CSS libraries, but not really any frameworks. I mean, you had to sort of include, if you wanted your CSS to look a certain way and you wanted to use someone else's CSS, you would find yourself linking to like a million different style sheets. And that would get really, really complicated because let's say one style sheet has a, I don't know, a button class. And then another style sheet has a button class. Now you've got the CSS conflict, and it was just really complicated to try to juggle 38 style sheets all at once. So the Twitter guys came along and they were like, hey, we want Twitter to have this really specific look, so we're going to make this thing where we're just sort of making our own framework. It's not really a library anymore. It's more of a framework. And what I mean by, well, let's see. Who can tell me what the difference is between a library and a framework? Walter.
I would say a library, well, a framework is where your application would run in, whereas a library would just be a list of like methods and certain data structures.
Yeah.
So jQuery is a library, so it's just a whole bunch of methods that allow you to select HTML elements, but jQuery is not a framework.
Yeah.
It's still running in the browser.
That's exactly right. That's a really good way of putting it. And just to add on to that, the way I usually think of it is you insert a library into your code, and you insert your code into a framework. So you insert a library into your code, and you insert your code into a framework. That is, you make a library follow your rules, whereas you make your code follow the rules of a framework, if that makes sense. And so this was like the very first CSS frameworky thing that existed and was sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to things. So even though Bootstrap has only been around for 4 years, I mean, already pretty much everyone is trying to emulate Bootstrap, which is really pretty cool. That just sort of demonstrates the need for it, why we wanted it in the first place. And so like the next line in my notes here is Bootstrap is a godsend for developers. And you've heard me say this before. You can make the most amazing backend functionality ever, but unless you have like a nice wrapper to put it in, a way of making it look good, it's going to be really hard to buy it. It's going to be really hard to sell it, and people probably aren't going to want to buy it. Hence, it's going to be hard to sell it. That makes sense. My understanding is in the outcomes thing yesterday, they talked about like the importance of CSS or something. Obviously, I wasn't there. Does anyone want to regale me on like what was discussed?
Well, some of the companies were only interested in front-end stuff, so they used pattern management systems. They were interested in using Bootstrap.
Okay, cool. John?
It said if it wasn't responsive, they don't really care to look any farther.
Oh, really? Interesting. If it's not responsive, they don't care to look any farther. Wow. Okay. Well, that's one nice thing about Bootstrap is it makes things responsive right out of the box. So, like looking at this, I got this sort of like 2-column thing going on, and then as soon as I start shrinking this down, it all merges into 1 column. And if I shrink it down even further, it should be even 1 column here. Oh, I don't really like that. This and this are different sizes, but you win some and lose some, I guess. So yeah, Bootstrap lets you make a polished-looking app with minimal effort. And of course, as a result of that, many websites today look bootstrappy. But I would posit that it is better to spend 15 minutes making Bootstrap work on your app than it is to spend 3 days writing your own CSS. And again, you know me and my whole like Protestant ethic thing. Like it goes against like everything I was ever raised with, where I'm like, no, do the miserable thing, do the thing that takes a lot longer. But no, really, I mean, spending 15 minutes on Bootstrap is probably a better bet than spending 3 days on CSS. Why is that? Well, obviously, it takes only 15 minutes as opposed to 3 days. But even more than that, well, and I mean, there are some other things too, like a lot of people you're trying to pitch yourself and your products to, like they don't really know what Bootstrap is, and so if you give them something that looks terrible, if you give them something that has no CSS at all, or if you give them something that uses Bootstrap, they're going to think you wrote all the CSS yourself either way. So you may as well give them something that looks good because they don't really know any better. But even more than that, why might tech-savvy employers, so ones who do know about Bootstrap and do recognize Bootstrap, why might they prefer hiring a developer who spent 15 minutes implementing Bootstrap as opposed to a developer who spent 3 days writing their own CSS? And I say that because, like, I mean, not just because of the time and money thing, but like, I mean, wouldn't spending 3 days writing your own CSS, doesn't that show like really good work ethic? And wouldn't that be like something really desirable? Jeremy?
Using those 3 days on any other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but even just beyond just the time thing. So what I'm going for here is having a presentable, oh, sorry, were you raising your hand?
Kind of. I wasn't very confident, but I think it has to deal with, I guess, how flexible the code can be, so that when someone else is working on it, if you spend 3 days on your own CSS, and you're probably the only one that really knows how to edit that. Versus
Yeah.
15 minutes is probably a lot of repetitive things, stuff that somebody else can come in and change pretty easily.
Yeah, that's another really great point. But the thing that I was thinking about is that having a presentable front end anymore is a lot like just putting your name on the test before you turn it in. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just assumed that you will have a presentable front end. And if you don't, that's a really pretty big oversight. So like thinking about putting your name on a test before you turn it in, if you just write your name in Chicken Scratch, or if you write it in calligraphy and spend like half an hour painstakingly writing your name on the test, I mean, obviously, that doesn't really have an impact on how you actually do on the test, right? I mean, I guess you could say that like writing in calligraphy shows that you're more meticulous or something, but that's not going to get you a better grade. And it's really the same thing with front ends on applications. I mean, as long as your application has a front end that is usable, that's really the most important thing. Now, obviously, the exception to this is if you're getting hired to a design role or some very front-end heavy role where you're expected to be doing a lot of CSS. Then, just using Bootstrap probably isn't going to cut it. But as a developer, for more back-end, more programming roles, Bootstrap really is a godsend, and it really would behoove you to like really bone up on it and really get, I don't know, close with it. This is sounding way more intimate than I intended. But any questions about that? John?
Even if you are doing the designing,
Can you speak up a bit?
even if you are doing the sort of designing, trying to show your CSS abilities, is there any reason not to just do that on top of Bootstrap?
No, I would say that's fine too. Yeah, I mean, then it's just about differentiating yourself from other people. Yeah, Carl.
So, like for portfolio websites, would it be good to handroll it or do a Bootstrap?
I mean, it depends on, again, it depends on the position. If you're going for a really front-end heavy position where you're also expected to manage the interface and like do stuff to UX, then showing some CSS prowess might not be a bad idea. But if you're interviewing for like a much more back-end heavy position where you're managing the databases and the routing and everything, and really may not even ever touch the front end. Shame. But if you're doing a much more back-end heavy role, then there's really not a need. So I would just use Bootstrap for that. But ultimately it's a choice that you sort of have to make when you think about what it is that you want to do. I mean, you may as well do both. Like, if you really want to cover all bases, so that you can do Bootstrap and CSS. But you also don't want to, like, I don't know, if you really want a back-end role, you don't want someone to be like, oh, hey, I see that you do CSS. We're going to hire you to be a front-end developer. And then it's like, well, crap, I need a job. I want to work for you, but I don't want to be your front-end developer. Yeah.
Well, is Bootstrap modular enough to be able to customize to fit different roles?
We'll talk about that. Any other questions about sort of the, I don't know, philosophy of bootstrapping, I guess? No? Cool. So, Bootstrap's classes have weird names. So let me see if I can pull this up. PJ, Oof, QuickTime is slowing down my computer. All right, so here are some of Bootstrap's weird classes. Pop over, scroll spy, blah, 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 blah. So you are going to go on a boot scavenger hunt. Yeah, originally I was going to walk through all of these classes, like just line by line, and then I was like, man, that sounds boring. I don't want to do that. That's sort of the thing about CSS. Is so much of CSS is just sort of, CSS is much easier to pick up like individual little things than JavaScript. There are no errors that are going to be thrown at you. So I'm like, you know what? You guys are going to do the heavy lifting, and instead I'm going to have you guys go through and look up what each one of these things does. So for the next 10 minutes, I would like you to Google madly to make a cheat sheet for yourself of what these different things are. These are some of the most useful and prominent features of Bootstrap. So with someone at your table or by yourself if you're feeling antisocial or if you don't feel like moving, for each of these, please write down what each word means and also a URL that shows an example of that particular word or thing in action. Okay? So you're going to do that for 10 minutes, making a cheat sheet for yourself of what all of these things are. And that's it. We good? And then we'll go over it all together at the end. Okay, off you go. What sweet jam should I put on? Someone say my name? Yeah, John. Sure. Okay, as soon as the Final Fantasy music is over, then we're gonna resume.